It happened in the basement of a museum in Paris, 1999. Astrophysicist Michael Rappengluck is sitting in front of an enlarged photograph of the ceiling of Lascaux Cave in southern France. He was not looking for a star map. He had no intention of discovering anything. He was simply looking at the shapes. A bull, a bird, a rhinoceros, painted 17,000 years ago. And then he understood. 3 dots above the bull's head, the distance between them, their relative brightness, the angle of their arrangement. These were not decorative marks. This was the Pleiades star cluster, precise, verified, reproducible using modern astronomical software. Rappengluck published his findings in Sky and Telescope magazine. The scientific world's response was measured. Not a refutation, because refuting mathematics is difficult, but not excitement either, because if a person 17,000 years ago knew where the Pleiades were and considered it important enough to paint on the ceiling of a sacred cave, that raises an uncomfortable question about everything else we do not know about them. Lascaux is just the beginning. It is a known discovery, documented, accepted. But there are 8 other places, deeper, older, and far more inconvenient. Places where someone painted the sky underground, not simplified, not symbolic, precisely, with star coordinates corresponding to specific dates in the past, with geometry that requires not just observation, but calculation, with stone-working technologies that, according to the official timeline, simply should not have existed yet. Someone was watching the stars. Then they went underground and left behind what they had seen. The question is not whether this is real. The artifacts exist. They are in museums, carved into rock faces, buried underground on 4 continents. The question is, why? And why official science is so slow to answer. September 17, 1940. 4 teenagers from the French town of Montignac are searching for their missing dog. The dog had fallen into a hole on a hillside. The boys widened the opening, crawled inside, and found themselves in one of the greatest art galleries in human history. The walls and ceiling of the cave were covered with hundreds of animal images, bulls, horses, deer, rhinoceroses, painted with such anatomical precision that the first art historians refused to believe their age. These images date to approximately 17,000 years before Christ. We are talking about a time when Scandinavia was still buried under a glacier. For decades, researchers focused on the artistic and religious value of the paintings. Then, Rappengluck arrived. Michael Rappengluck, a researcher at the University of Munich, began systematically analyzing the placement of dots and groups of images in Lascaux, not as art, but as possible astronomical documentation. His method was simple. He took a specific group of dots, measured the distances between them, and compared them to star catalogs adjusted for precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that gradually changes the appearance of the night sky over thousands of years. The 3 dots above the bull's head in the Hall of the Bulls matched the Pleiades with a precision that is difficult to dismiss as coincidence. Furthermore, the summer triangle, one of the most recognizable configurations of the summer sky, formed by the stars Vega, Deneb, and Altair, was identified in another section of the cave. The relative positions matched perfectly. Here we need to be honest. Rappengluck does not claim that all the paintings in Lascaux are star maps. He claims that certain dot configurations are too precise to be accidental. That is a fair objection, but here's the detail that makes skepticism harder: the date. Rappengluck established that the Pleiades configuration in Lascaux corresponds to the sky approximately 17,000 years ago, which matches the carbon-14 dating of the paintings. So, if this is a star map, it depicts the sky at exactly the time it was painted, not the past, not the future, that same moment. Why did a cave-dwelling person need a map of the sky underground? That question has no simple answer, but it opens the door to 7 other places where the same logic, stars, underground chambers, ancient precision, repeats itself again and again across millennia and across continents.
Zhejiang Province, China. A farmer named Wu Anai decided to do something his neighbors considered a waste of time. He rented a pump and began draining a pond. 17 days. Then the bottom of the pond appeared, and it turned out there was no bottom. There was a ceiling, the ceiling of a vast, artificially carved underground hall. Wu Anai drained a second pond, a third, a fourth. When the work was finished, 24 caves had been discovered beneath the surface, each one the size of a small cathedral, columns of precise form, walls covered in an identical diagonal chisel pattern at exactly 60 degrees from floor to ceiling without a single deviation. The total area is over 30,000 square meters. Then researchers calculated how much stone had to be removed to create them, over 1 million cubic meters, and asked, where did it go? There are no spoil heaps around the caves, no mountains of removed stone anywhere nearby. They are simply absent. This is the first anomaly. The second is the silence in written sources. Chinese civilization documented everything: floods, harvests, astrological observations, the movements of armies, but 24 massive underground halls, whose construction would have required the coordinated labor of thousands of workers over decades, not a single text mentions it. Not during the Han Dynasty, not later. But the most interesting detail emerged when researchers began analyzing the orientation of the caves and a series of grooves carved into certain ceiling sections. Chinese astronomer Sun Wei noticed symmetry in the arrangement of the grooves. When a star map of the corresponding region of sky was overlaid onto the image, the grooves aligned with the positions of stars in the constellations Orion and Ursa Major. The official status of the Longyou caves is an unsolved mystery. Researchers who have studied them, including Japanese and American geological engineers, leave the underground halls with one shared conclusion: the degree of precision is incompatible with the tools that, according to the official version, were available to the builders. Someone built this. Someone removed 1 million tons of stone, and nobody wrote a single word about it. Herodotus saw it with his own eyes. Around 450 before Christ, the Greek historian visited Egypt and described a building he called more impressive than all the pyramids combined. He counted 3,000 rooms, half above ground, half below it. The underground section was not shown to him. The priests forbade it. There, they explained, were buried the kings and the sacred crocodiles. Strabo visited the same site 4 centuries later. Pliny the Elder. All of them described the same thing: a grand structure near what is now Hawara in Egypt. Today, on that site, there is a flat field, nothing. The official explanation is that the material was dismantled in antiquity for construction. But in 2008, that explanation got serious competition. A Belgian-Egyptian research team conducted geophysical ground scanning at Hawara using ground-penetrating radar. They published the results. Beneath the surface, at a depth of 2 to 5 meters, the instruments detected clear rectangular structures, regular geometry, hundreds of rooms. Their layout matched the descriptions of Herodotus. The team applied for excavation permits. The Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities refused. No official explanation was given. The permit has not been issued to this day. Geophysical data exists, it is published, and it aligns with what Herodotus described 2,500 years ago. In Egyptian texts, there are repeated references to underground halls where the maps of the paths of the gods are preserved.
If the underground section of the labyrinth existed and contained what the priests described, then what was stored there may not have been simply tombs. It may have been astronomical texts, star maps, records of incalculable value. Beneath an Egyptian field, possibly, lies the largest unexcavated archive in human history, and nobody is digging. The Turkish province of Cappadocia. A man named Demir Okuz is renovating the basement of his home and breaks through a wall. Behind it, a dark corridor. He walks forward. The corridor does not end. What researchers eventually uncovered exceeded all expectations. Derinkuyu is an underground city 18 levels deep, depth over 85 meters, designed to house at least 20,000 people, together with their livestock, food, and water. But there is one detail that sets Derinkuyu apart: the doors. On each level there are massive stone discs, perfectly circular, weighing between 1 and 3 tons. They roll into dedicated grooves and block the corridors. They can be closed from the inside with a single movement, but opening them from the outside is impossible. Whoever designed these doors had one thing in mind: how to protect those inside from those outside. The official construction date is approximately 800 before Christ, but several geologists expressed cautious doubts. The lower levels may be significantly older than the upper ones. And here is where the sky enters. Turkish researchers documented in the 1990s a series of dot patterns on the walls. By their analysis, these correspond to the stars of Orion and Scorpius. Derinkuyu is part of a network. At least 200 underground cities have been found beneath Cappadocia. Some are connected by tunnels stretching up to 10 kilometers. This is not a series of independent projects. This is a single system. A system built to survive something serious enough that 20,000 people needed to go deep underground and lock themselves in. What were they hiding from? Neil Armstrong has just returned from the moon. He's the most famous person on the planet, and he's about to descend into an underground cave in the Ecuadorian Amazon, not as part of NASA, not for any government, by his own choice. A Scotsman named Stan Hall had spent years trying to organize a scientific expedition to the Taos Caves. Legends spoke of an underground world of the ancestors, great halls containing metal books recording all the wisdom of humanity. Hall recruited Armstrong as a public figure to attract attention. Armstrong agreed. The expedition of 1976 descended into the caves. Armstrong spent several days underground. He emerged in silence. At the press conference, he said only that the caves had impressed him. Until the end of his life, he never publicly described what he had seen. Inside the caves, thousands of plates made from an unknown metal alloy were found. The alloy matched no standard composition. The symbols were not identified as any known writing system. The Egyptian government declared the region a nature reserve and closed access. These are documented events. What did Neil Armstrong see underground in Ecuador, and why did he never tell anyone? There are places that are difficult to reach even today. Beneath the Pelkhor Chode Monastery in Tibet, they found a system of artificial caves. Local monks call it the Star Cave. One of the ceilings is covered with thousands of dots. American astronomer Edwin Krupp examined photographs and noted that if this is a star map, the configuration corresponds to the sky from approximately 10 to 12,000 years before Christ. Krupp is an academic astronomer with decades of experience. The data is incomplete, but the existence of a systematic dot pattern beneath one of Tibet's oldest monasteries is documented. Ancient Tibetan texts describe underground guardians of knowledge between civilization cycles. Different cultures, different continents, the same image. Underground guardians, stellar knowledge, again and again. Nature magazine publishes a study on the Pangjian caves in China. The conclusion: 500,000 years ago, inside these caves, someone was systematically butchering large animals in a way that demonstrates knowledge of anatomy. All of this is attributed to Homo erectus, a species that, by traditional understanding, lacked the cognitive abilities for this level of organization. Some tools found at Pangxian were made from stone that does not occur in the region. This means either long-distance trade or movement across hundreds of kilometers 500,000 years ago. Every time science establishes a lower boundary for human cognition, someone finds something even older.
Bosnia. Dr. Samir Osmanagic announces that a hill near Visoko is a pyramid. While that debate continues, something more interesting was found underground. Kilometers of artificial tunnels. The walls are covered with a material quality exceeding modern concrete. Ceramic fragments found inside were dated to over 34,000 years old. If correct, this is the oldest architectural construction ever found in Europe, older than Stonehenge by 30,000 years. Inside the tunnels, ultrasonic resonance was recorded. And again, the sky. On the ceilings of several sections, dot patterns have been documented that are structurally similar to those in Lascaux. An uncomfortable fact with no answer is not the absence of a fact. It is simply the absence of an answer. 8 places, 4 continents, from 17,000 to 500,000 years ago. Each one has its own anomaly, but there is one thread connecting all 8. Stars, underground, Lascaux, Longyou, the Egyptian labyrinth, the Tibetan star chamber, the Bosnian tunnels. This is not a coincidence. Geology does not lie. Earth has survived several sharp climatic catastrophes. An event 12,900 years ago caused sudden cooling and rising sea levels. Now put yourself in the position of someone who knows catastrophe is coming. Where do you hide the most valuable things? Not on the surface, underground, deep. And to ensure those who come after the catastrophe know where to look for, you leave them a clue. The sky, the stars. Constellations do not change on a human timescale. If you know which constellation to look for, you can find the entrance. This is the bunker theory. An ancient civilization knew catastrophe was approaching. They hid their knowledge underground, and they left star maps as a navigation system for the survivors. We possibly are those survivors who still have not understood that we are holding the key. If somewhere underground right now there is an archive of a lost civilization, what would it need to contain to change everything we know about ourselves? Thank you for staying until the end. Subscribe and hit the bell. Next week we go even further. Underwater pyramids that officially do not exist, but they are there, and there are people who have seen them.